I don't want no oil a-spoiling my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No nukes! Good morning, Toledo, and good afternoon, Columbus, and hello to those of you listening on the internet, wherever, whatever you may be, and a special hello and apology to our listeners on WBGU in Bowling Green. For the past couple of weeks, there's been scheduling difficulties. You've been hearing a repeat of a show we did back in March, so welcome back. And if you want to see what you missed, of course, you can go to our podcast at podomatic.com. Just search for Agreed Future, or listen to our YouTube version. We have a YouTube channel. And what we show on what we're talking about on For Agreed Future every week is ecology and the environment. And we talk about it in the ways that it affects you, your wealth, your health, your happiness, wealth and health and happiness of your friends and your families and your pets and the trees out in your yard and the plants in your garden and pretty much everybody and everything, because, like it or not, we're all wrapped up together on this wonderful planet called Earth. And here with my fantastic co-host,
Rebecca Wood, who just wrote the number 2024 for the very first time.
Yes. And 2024 is especially significant because this is the 5th anniversary of our show. We've been doing the show for 5 years now, and loved almost every minute of it. I'd say we loved 98% of the minutes of it.
Yeah.
And this is a good show. We don't have a guest today, so we're just going to chat for a little bit here. And then one thing we like to do when we don't have guests is talk about a basic ecological principle. And so at about quarter after, we're going to do that. We're going to talk about the basic principle of keystone species. What are they? Who are they? And what do they do? And why are they important to you? Then we'll hear from our wonderful advertisers and patrons, to whom we are eternally grateful, and without whom these 5 years would not have been possible. We could not have been doing the show. So we're very happy to talk about them. And then Rebecca, it's your turn at the mic, and what will you be discussing this week?
We will be celebrating national. I'm not kidding. National Pass Gas Day with a few short brief facts on methane.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. A very important gas in our atmosphere.
Yes.
Some people are more responsible than others for the amount that we have. Then it'll be ecological.
Hey, nobody asked you for that crack.
Then it's ecological news, and we have, as usual, we have news from around the world, both good and bad, but always important. And hopefully we will hear from you. And we are live back in the studio, which is, I'm so psyched. Yeah, it's Rebecca and me in the studio. This has not happened since March of last year.
I know.
There's been the two of us here in the studio. And Jared, you're going to have to remind me of our number here. It's 877. Oh, go on.
Yes, let's see here. It's turned me up there. All right. So
Okay.
if you're looking for the zone phone, it's 877-909-1007. 877-909-1007, the zone phone.
Yes, thank you very
Or
much.
the ticket phone, I should say, the ticket phone.
Right, and right, 877-909-1007. And especially asking for people to call in this week with like their favorite memory of these past 5 years. We have done just an incredible amount of reporting and sharing ecological information with you folks. And one thing that I wanted to talk about a little bit before we talk about keystone species are sort of my favorite memories from these last 5 years. And actually, Rebecca and I were realizing that we have to start with something that's not a favorite memory, but it's it's kind of an important memory, and that is one issue we've been covering since the start of the show. Like one of our very first shows, we talked about HB6, Ohio's HB6. Anybody who's a regular listener to the show knows that we've been covering that since.
And covering it and covering it and covering it.
Right, and
it's less a favorite subject, is just we're kind of trauma bonded with at this point.
that's right, yeah, because the HB6 itself was horrible. There is definite trauma
And it
talking
just
about
kept
it,
getting better and better.
yeah, just kept going. And just to remind everybody, that was the bill introduced way back in 2019 that penalized wind and solar power, and it added a charge to everyone's bills to subsidize the nuclear power plants and the coal plants. One coal plant in Indiana, one in southern Ohio. And we've been following the drama, and it has been an incredible drama. It's got everything. It's got $65 million in bribes. It's got a suicide of one of the insiders that hatched this conspiracy. Just recently, the chief architect, Larry Householder, was sentenced to 20 years in federal prison, and one of his henchmen got 5 years, and it's not done yet, because Sam Randazzo, another one of the former head of the PUCO, Public Utilities Commission, is still going to be facing charges. He just got arrested and went to arraignment, and he could be facing also 20 years in prison. Maybe he'll get maybe he'll share a cell with Householder. That might be
Maybe so. Hopefully they like each other.
right. So that was one of our trauma memories, but important to mention. But we've had a lot of really good experiences over the past 5 years. And as I said, if you remember like a favorite show or favorite experience or favorite thing we described on the show, give us a call, 877-909-1007. And one of my favorite interviews still were the interviews that we've done with a woman named Helen Chenoweth from Australia. And Helen is famous in anti-nuclear circles because way back in the 1980s, she toured the country and helped get the anti-nuclear weapons treaties in place, like the SALT I and SALT II, because what she did was she just described to everybody what would happen if there was a nuclear war. And her descriptions were so clinical and accurate and graphic that people kind of thought, maybe we could get through this. Reagan famously had a saying that, well, if you had enough shovels, we could all survive a nuclear war because we'll just dig holes. And
all right.
yeah, she basically
except for the thing where there's going to be nuclear winter and no food for a very long time.
Right,
and,
plus
yeah,
the
then
radioactive
radiation
waste,
sickness,
yeah,
a
and
slight problem.
yeah, all that stuff. So she set this record straight and basically helped keep us out of a nuclear war. I'm convinced. So she's always been one of my heroes. Another one of my heroes was Lois Gibbs. We got to interview her at some point. She was the person who pushed the whole Love Canal thing forward, which was a toxic waste dump in Niagara Falls, New York, that affected the presidential election between Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan. And she was always one of my heroes. So to interview her on the show has been one of the highlights. Some other important highlights that I think that I think it's worth sharing what just happened this past year, East Palestine, going down there and giving firsthand reporting on what was going on when the official story was, we've got it all under control. There's no leaks of any kind. There's no chemicals floating around in the air, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you when you break open rail cars and pour poisons like vinyl chloride into the environment. It just makes sense that there's going to be some floating around there.
Yeah.
And by going down there ourselves and smelling the chemical fumes ourselves and getting, feeling the effects of those chemicals ourselves, we were able to report in a way that the mainstream media wouldn't touch, because they're so cautious that even though they're reporters, I know because we actually saw them and heard them talking, they were also feeling these chemical effects, but they weren't comfortable reporting what was happening to their own bodies, because the official story was, nothing's wrong. There's no chemicals down there. So that was that was exciting and sad, but I'm glad we were able to do it.
I guess you can't actually prove that you just don't mysteriously feel ill for no reason around East Palestine. It could be a coincidence.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not, but it could be.
Right. It's like they didn't have the confirmation of what was happening to themselves. But we're luckily we're not constrained by those things.
Yes.
If we feel sick, we're going to say, you know what, we feel sick. There's still some. We think there's still some chemicals in the air, and of course, since then, many East Palestine residents have complained about health effects that would be caused by chemicals like vinyl chloride. So it looks like we were, ahead of our time there. A very recent interview that we just did with Vina Kali is one of my favorites now, because she's down there in Piketon, Ohio, and she basically talked about the effects of the attempts to reprocess nuclear waste that have resulted in widespread contamination down there. And people getting sick, huge high cancer rates, much higher than the average for Ohio, and much higher than the average for the country. And as an anti-nuclear activist for many, many years, you know intellectually that there's no way to break up these fuel rods and extract the plutonium and the uranium without causing widespread contamination. So it's like I knew it had to be true, and having her on talking about her firsthand experiences and the firsthand experiences of the other people living in that area, proved it. It showed, she said, yes, we have been contaminated, and they had to abandon an entire school building because the contamination is spreading, which as an ecologist, that once you've contaminated an area with something like plutonium or uranium, it's going to spread. And again, confirming what we do intellectually and on principle we do, but in practice.
It shows how deep the gaslighting goes.
Yes. Another favorite story, one of my favorites was talking to the Native American woman called Slato. Also, she also goes by the name of Molly, and up there in British Columbia, fighting the Trans Mountain Pipeline. And we have a story on Trans Mountain later in the show. But her conviction and her bravery and her being willing to stand up to the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and to fight for her land, it's just so beautiful and so inspirational. And she's still fighting today, as we know we just interviewed her about 2 months ago. But my interviews with her have really, I found them moving. Dr. Mark Jacobson from Stanford, the fella who basically said and has been saying and has the numbers and the graphs and the studies to prove we can get to 100% carbon free using just wind, water, and solar, folks. And anybody who tells you different, anybody who said, oh, we've got to keep natural gas going, or oh, we've got to keep building more nukes, no. He has proven, and it's not just him, because his research is based on literally thousands of other papers by experts in energy fields. All we need is wind turbines, hydro, solar and storage. We do need some batteries and stuff, but there's plenty of wind. There's enough energy in the wind and the sun to provide us with all we need, and we don't need nukes, so we don't need coal, and we don't need natural gas. So having him on has been a great treat over these past 5 years. And another story that we have been covering that really gets to be Stephanie C., who is protecting the last Yellowstone bison.
The buffalo lady, I like her. Is there a wolf lady too? I feel like there's a wolf lady.
There is a wolf lady,
Yeah,
Stephanie C. is the buffalo lady, and Colette Atkins from the Center for Biological Diversity. She's the wolf lady, and yeah, both of them.
Personal favorites for the completely irrational reason that I really just like critters. I know they always have sad things to say, but still I like them.
Yes, well, and Colette, they just had a huge victory that wolves have been declared an endangered species, which means
diggity,
they
finally
have to be protected, and there will be laws against hunting them in the whole lower 48 states. So it's not all sad. Sometimes we win.
Excellent.
So one other thing, or two other things. First, I wanted to talk about one of the other reasons that I love being able to do this show is I love being able to memorialize some of the people I know when they pass, who are just, who were wonderful advocates for the environment. And just to list a few, my friend Neocles Leontis from Bowling Green, Phyllis Oster, who worked with fruit flies and did the original research that showed even super low levels of radiation are harmful, genetically speaking. I was able to memorialize my own wife, Carolyn Koweka, who passed back in 2021, December of 2021. And, these are people who are brave people who fight for the environment, and it's good to be able to give them some credit when they pass. And so I'm just going to finish this little section with my favorite story, personal favorite story from the past 5 years, was when mayflies actually shut down the Furby 2 nuclear power plant. Somehow, for me, that sort of just sums everything up. These little mayflies that exist for like one day, it just attacked the Furby 2 nuclear plant and shorted out its transformers, and they had to shut this horrible nuclear plant, which is churning out poisons, radioactive poisons that are going to be around for millions of years. And these little ephemeral dayflies shut them down for like a week. That was
almost like I remember hearing at one point in the 80s in reference to Fernald that they were concerned that the domes, the concrete domes over the radioactive waste might collapse if there was too much snow on them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nature has spoken clearly, and it spoke clearly just last week in Japan, where they had another huge earthquake that damaged more nuclear plants. It did damage they're admitting to on 2 nuclear plants.
Wow.
And they haven't admitted to all the damage yet, but it really the current LDP, Liberal Democratic Party Prime Minister, he's nuke crazy. He wants to carpet his country in nuclear power plants. One of the most geologically active countries in the world that has some of the biggest earthquakes. He wants, but
I just remember hearing the snow thing and thinking, and God help us if a squirrel has to go to the bathroom while they're scampering over a nuclear dome. That's going to be bad.
Yeah.
They're going to fall right down.
Yeah, no, it's clear Mother Nature doesn't like the nuke plants or most of the stuff we're doing to her. So, but we're still learning about ecology. I call ecology the queen of the sciences because it has to incorporate all the other sciences. It incorporates chemistry, geology, meteorology, and you got biology, and you tie it all together to try to understand the whole system. And this past week on the television program Nature, they had a wonderful documentary, and so advise you, if you can, go back and watch it. Maybe you can find it on the internet because it was this week's episode. This wonderful show on keystone species. And this is one of the basic ecological concepts, which was first proposed way back in the 1960s, but has taken this long before it has become, that's accepted ecological science. Keystone species are a real thing. And what a keystone species is one species that like an entire ecosystem depends on. And so what happens if you remove the keystone species, the whole ecosystem literally collapses. Just like if you pulled the keystone out of an arch, that arch is going to collapse and the wall is going to fall down. And so they have found over and over again all over the world in different ecosystems that there can be like the one creature, the one animal or the one plant that if you remove it, everything collapses. And they gave some, very excellent examples during the show. The original research, the original concept of a keystone species was done with sea otters. And sea otters are critters that live in the kelp forest. And the kelp forest is an incredibly diverse forest. There's literally thousands of different species living in a kelp forest.
And they eat the sea urchins, so they don't eat too much seaweed and world go poof.
That's
in
right.
Flames. Yeah. Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
I know this one.
Yes. Because what happens is the sea otters eat the sea urchins, and if there are no sea otters around, then the urchins eat the kelp forest. What they do is actually they cut the kelp off right at the base, and they're doing this in part to
Well, because they're short, you can't really blame them,
Well, yeah, they don't climb up
sea
and
urchins very, very short.
eat down from the top. No,
Right.
they go right for the base. But
Yeah.
I think it's actually quote unquote intentional, because what happens is once they've cut the kelp out, everything else disappears, the seals, the fish, and what you're left with is what's called an urchin barrens, which is the place the algae grows in place of the kelp on the rock, and the sea urchins can feed just fine, thank you, on the algae.
So they'll be fine. I don't
Right.
know about the rest of us.
Exactly. So you get rid of literally 1,000 species and you replace them with 2.
So they're kind of, sea urchins are farmers, basically. So but they have an unfortunate tendency to monoculture, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Even worse than us.
They
maybe.
do monoculture with algae that grows on the rocks, and the algae need the light that the kelp would be using. The kelp, if there's a kelp forest, it shades out this algae that the urchins can live on. But if you see an algae or a urchin barren, and they had plenty of video of it on this show, it's just miles and miles of thousands and thousands of urchins and rocks covered with algae, and that's it. So another example is wolves. Wolves are a keystone species. You pull them out, and the grazers like the deer and the elk will eat everything else, and you get down
they eat in patterns too, right? Like they eat everything in one place instead of continuing to move around.
Right, because why move around?
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the reasons wolves are a keystone species is not just that they eat the deer and the elk, but they scare them.
Yes.
They keep them moving and afraid
Fear
and
got
hiding.
into them.
Yes, and so they don't literally just spend 8 hours a day eating. They spend most of their day like hiding, and then they'll come out at the twilight when the wolves, it's hard for them to see them, and and that way.
You want those deer scared instead of fat and sassy.
Right, and that way you get what's called biodiversity. You get lots of different species now that can live there. Thousands of different species can live in and bison are a keystone species. Even though they do populate in great numbers, they don't wipe out the prairie that they live on. They maintain the prairie because they've evolved a grazing pattern where they're not like sheep or deer who just eat everything and move on. They like take a bite and walk a little ways and they take another bite, and their footprints provide habitat for things like frogs. Frogs will actually lay pollywog eggs in bison footprints.
Wow.
and yeah, so the whole prairie ecosystem, bison are a keystone species. And over in Africa, they found wildebeest was another, like bison, wildebeest,
Stands to reason.
right, turned out to be a keystone species. Remove them and everything collapses. You'd think it would get, that it would be like a boon because they're grazers and they eat the grass, but
Right.
actually remove them and you get rid of the giraffes and the elephants and all the other species that you think about as on the African savanna, because what they do is they keep the grass, like the bison. They sort of keep the whole ecosystem. They allow trees to grow because trees don't, they won't eat the trees, the saplings, and so once you get trees, now you can have giraffes. And
Makes sense.
yeah, and so with wildebeest you get a mix of grasses and trees and open savanna, and without them you just get like short grasses that are overgrazed and very few species. And so that also got me to thinking about the idea of an anti-keystone species. Like, if you look at sea otters as a keystone species, you have to look at sea urchins as an anti-keystone species, right? Because they actually will destroy the ecosystem, the huge biodiverse ecosystem with lots of critters.
Well, yeah, but maybe we need them for something too. Like, what if there's too much seaweed?
Well, I mean, in a balanced ecosystem,
Right.
the sea otters keep the sea urchins numbers where they're manageable, but it kind of made me think of humans. Right now, we're kind of an anti-keystone species.
But yeah, my one uncle used to call us the ultimate invasive species.
Yeah, because we kind of go in there and we take these big, rich ecosystems and we cut them down and we put in our monocultures and have very few critters. But we are learning. I mean, we talk a lot about restoration here, and there have been very significant success stories in humans restoring rich ecosystems to where they were. Like we were putting wolves back into a lot of ecosystems, like Colorado. One of the highlights of the last couple of years was Colorado passing the law saying that they're going to restore wolves to their natural numbers in that state. So we can be a keystone species or we can be an anti-keystone species. On the balance right now, we're mostly an anti-keystone species, but hopefully in the future, we'll keep learning, keep watching cool documentaries like that nature show, and change those into policies, into laws, into action that will restore the planet. That's why we have this show, For a Green Future. I mean, we are focused on a future that
It's all in the name.
livable, right? Yeah. All right. Well, that takes us to the bottom of the hour, and now we're going to hear from our sponsors.
For a Green Future is also brought to you by the Wood County Park District. The Wood County Park District is a natural resources conservation agency. They protect natural spaces, maintain quality green spaces, provide engaging programming, and they teach people to love and respect nature. They also restore wildlife habitats and lead people on outdoor adventures. Wood County Parks protects natural spaces in Wood County for all to enjoy from 8 a.m. to 30 minutes past sunset every day of the year. There are several ways to get a hold of them and find out what's happening. One is to call them at 419-353-1897. Another is to visit their website, www.wcparks.org. The website again is www.wcparks.org. They are also available on all social media, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and many others. Just search for WC Parks. That's the Wood County Park District, and we're very grateful for their support.
All right. And we also want to welcome our patrons. And these are wonderful people who've gone to patreon.com. That's patreon.com. And they searched for a Green Future. Up popped our terrific Patreon page with a bunch of cool pictures and stuff, and a bunch of different levels of support that people can do if they sign up, and once you sign up, every month a little bit will come out of your account, come over to us, and that's how we can afford to keep this wonderful show on the air. And if you're somebody who's been listening for the past 5 years and saying to yourself, I really should get on that Patreon page and sign up for $5 a month or something, this would be a good time. It's been 5 years. Feel free to visit our Patreon page. All right, and thanks again for the patrons who made this show possible. Okay, Rebecca, over to you. I'm
All right.
a little leery about this topic this week, but take it away.
It's just methane.
Okay.
Yeah, so someone actually did declare today National Pass Gas Day. I looked it up. Which sometimes one guy just comes up with this stuff and it makes the media, and now it's official. I don't know. You think it's been voted on by Congress, but not always.
I could picture the current Congress voting on that, and
Yeah.
I could also picture the debate. Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
go on.
But anyway, so I got most of the stuff from the combination of the University Corporation for Atmospheric Research, which is like a collection of 100 colleges that all do different kinds of atmospheric research, and the US EPA. I kind of switch back and forth between the two. One of the major gases which comes out of people, animals, etc., is methane. So yeah, it's a gas found in small quantities in the atmosphere, but it's very powerful. There's not very much of it, but you don't want very much. It turns out. It is the simplest hydrocarbon in that it has one carbon atom and 4 hydrogen atoms. So that's really all it is. That's the recipe. But it is a very powerful greenhouse gas. Methane is only 11.5%, I think, of all greenhouse gas emissions. Greenhouse gas being a gas that traps heat in the atmosphere. And some things that cause this are it's emitted during production and transportation of coal, oil, and natural gases. Also, agricultural activities. Also comes out of landfills. Also, cows and people. So this is a consideration when you have really, really large number of cows all in the same place. Serious problem. So yeah, it's a potent heat absorber is the thing that makes it dangerous. 1.8 pounds per minute, parts per million. Sorry, but it's only present as 1.8 parts per million in the atmosphere, but it's 20% of the heating effects of all gases.
Wow.
All greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Natural sources would include wetlands and ocean emissions, and the digestive processes of termites. Also, rice production tends in energy generation. It doesn't say what, well, it seems to be mostly the forms of energy production we're not wild about anyway.
Yeah, rice paddies are flooded areas with
Right.
decomposing stuff at the bottom, and that's what produces the methane from a rice paddy.
Or as the band The Jazz Butcher once said, fish is biodegradable, that means it rots. So yeah, and that means it produces methane, we would add. So yeah, it boils at 258.9 degrees Fahrenheit and melts at 295 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you see solid methane, you're probably dead.
Are you sure that's methane or in that Kelvin? Is it a K or an F?
It was an F.
Huh.
This is what I thought. So do you think that's not right?
I think that's not right.
Okay.
Because we know, if you have some dry ice, it's sublimating at room temperature.
That's methane isn't dry.
Oh, you're right. That's CO2. I'm sorry.
CO2,
Okay.
yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, but there's a bunch of greenhouse gases. CO2 would be another.
Yeah, but
important
CO2
one.
is a gas at room temperature, so it had to have boiled at less than room temperature. So I think that might be, Kelvin as opposed to Fahrenheit. But go on.
Right. So yeah, that might be about it. The transportation of coal, oil, and natural gas causes it. Also, landfills, humans, blah blah blah. Yeah. So yeah, methane.
Right.
It's a gas.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca.
You're welcome.
And I just want to add that to NOAA that has the charts that we quote sometimes about that show the rising CO2 levels, like down in Mauna Loa. They also measure methane, and methane is going up. Methane emissions are going up at the same pace that CO2 emissions are going up. So even though it's a much less methane, as you said, the impact is much higher. So
Yep.
yeah. So and we can't get through a show without using the phrase
Positive feedback loop.
right, because releasing methane can release more methane. Right?
Uh-oh.
So just like CO2. So,
Oh,
all right.
geez.
Okay, so on with
Is
the
it also
show.
used as a fuel? I think it's used as a fuel.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, the methane is what they call natural gas.
Right,
So if you
right.
heat your house with gas, you are burning methane in your furnace. Yeah, or on your stove. That's methane coming out of your stove.
Do you know, does it still have like the heat attracting powers after it's burned, or?
It turns into CO2,
Turns into CO2,
which is
also
much,
is bad.
which is
Okay.
also as bad, but it is much less carbon. Much less of a greenhouse gas, and so
Okay.
that's why if you pass like a refinery that has flares going, or a fracked gas plant, they have the flares going constantly.
Like,
what they're burning
like the
off,
entire east side of Toledo all the time.
yes, what they're
Yeah.
burning off at like a fracked place is methane, is extra methane, because burning it changes it to CO2, which means
less dangerous.
which is less dangerous.
Okay, so that is why they do that, which is
Yeah.
why you always see a flare going over there during at night.
Right.
Okay.
Plus, methane tends to be heavier than air, and so if you just put the methane out into the air, it could pool in like hollows and things.
Uh-oh.
And I had a friend who was a geologist who was actually told me a story. He was scouting for methane. He was looking, and he found a natural.
Does methane find him?
Yes,
Uh-oh.
because there are places in the world where methane seeps out of the ground naturally.
Right.
And he went into this little hollow, and it's an odorless, colorless gas.
Right.
And all of a sudden, he just was about to pass out, and he realized what had happened is there was a seep in the bottom of this little place, and he just walked down into it, and there was no air there. It was just methane, and he almost didn't make it out of there.
Oopsie
So
doodle.
yeah, it's a dangerous gas.
Yeah.
All right, and we need less of it, especially in the atmosphere. Okay, well, thank you, Rebecca, and that takes us to our ecological news segment. And this is another reason I appreciate doing this show every week, is because I scan the globe for important environmental stories, and I try to bring you guys, the most important ones, the ones that I think have kind of the long-term importance, not so much what's going on day to day, but and so the first story, we go to Texas, and KUT News in Texas on December 15th had a story. Texas power plants have no responsibility to provide power in emergencies, judge rules. And there was a 3-judge panel. It's First Court of Appeals and State Court. And what happened back in 2021, you may recall, they had a huge winter storm down there in Texas.
Oh yeah.
And they weren't ready for it. And it a lot of power stopped, and over at least 250 people died. 250 is the official number, but most objective outside observers say it was way more than 250. People literally froze to death down there.
Oh my God.
And so what happened is they're not allowed to sue the state of Texas. And so what a lot of them did was they brought suits against the electricity generators, the owners of the coal plants and the gas plants and the nuclear plants that all failed at really high rates, and led to the lack of electricity, led to the blackouts that led to the people being unable to heat their homes.
Oh boy.
And so what the state court ruled is, oh no, you can't sue them
Okay.
because of deregulation down there. Those producers all sell to distributors, and so they are, according to the state Court of Appeals, the First Court of Appeals, and their unanimous decision, they're insulated from the consumer. So because they're not selling you directly the electricity, they're selling it to a middleman, they can't be held responsible for not supplying it in an emergency. And
So in other words, they all knew they were going to mess this up in advance. Didn't care.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
a lot of them had they put, insulation around things. They had like heaters in the transformers and things. We obviously up here in the north, we deal with snow all the time, and our grid
Yeah,
doesn't shut
yeah.
down every time there's a snowstorm. And the reason is because there's little technical things you can do to keep them functioning. And they decided not to do that in Texas because it costs money, and we're Texas, we don't need that. And now the one, so yeah, so they're not held responsible, and I guess they assumed they wouldn't be, and they would have been right.
Basically.
Now the one positive thing about this, though, since 2021, is that Texans, in showing that remarkable, self-reliance thing, have gone head over heels for rooftop solar.
Yeah.
Because-
I would too at that point.
Yeah, because if once you realize that the electric company's not going to be responsible in an emergency, I have to rely on myself.
Basically.
They are putting up solar panels and backup batteries like crazy down there, to the point where in 2023, Texas has now passed California as the state that has the most installed solar. They've got 18,000 megawatts of solar, which is as much as almost 20 nuclear plants. And that's why this past summer, when they had record temperatures and the electric lines were in danger of melting, this time they didn't have blackouts because there were enough rooftop solar to pick up the slack and prevent that meltdown and blackouts.
Utility company tried to mess with Texas, and it
Yeah.
went badly, I guess, in the long run.
Right. Yeah. They messed
For them.
right.
Yeah.
All right, so bad news, good news there, and they're continuing. Texans are continuing to go solar, in the best American tradition of self-reliance there. Okay, next we go to a website called craftsmanship.net, and there's a story there. Some good news from France. There's a story by Jan Perouer about a woman named Laetitia Vasseur, and the title is "The End to Planned Obsolescence." And what has happened is France has banned planned obsolescence.
Oh, excellent.
Yes, so you can't design a product, and put a weakness in it, knowing that it's going to fail in like 3 or 5 years, and so you're forcing somebody to buy a whole new one. And this is the most common in the electronics industry. There's a lot of things that, like,
Yep.
some of the most famous examples were like Apple had batteries that couldn't be removed from some of their products. So once the battery died, you had to get a new product. Washing machines apparently are very susceptible to this, because what the manufacturers do is they put a lot of fancy electronic functions in there
Yeah.
that once they fail, the whole machine has to be thrown away, because you can't
Yep.
just fix the little electronic sensor or whatever. The way France has done it, there's 2 ways they're doing it. One is government mandated warranties that start at 2 years, and over time they're increasing. It's going to be 5 years, which here in the U.S. pretty much everybody offers like a 30-day warranty, or maybe a 90-day, or maybe a 1-year warranty. But if you want more than that, you have to pay extra. You have to pay them to not design something that's going to die on you. But there over in France, it's going to be a 5-year warranty on pretty much everything. And they're also creating a what's called a repairability index. And well, they already created the repairability index.
Okay.
That was in 2020. They put things on a scale of 1 to 10 on how easy it is to fix them. But what they're starting in 2024 is a durability index, which is not only how easy it is to fix them, but how long you could expect them to last, how much power they're going to use. They have a whole bunch of stuff they tossed into this durability index. So when you go to buy something, you can be confident, okay, I can count on this lasting at least 5 years, or it should last 10 years. And if it breaks, I should be able to fix it. The EU has kind of followed France's lead on this. And right now, the EU requires spare parts for repairs. So if you're a company that makes something, you have to be able to provide the repair shops with the parts to fix it, which is a huge thing.
Very good.
I used to work at a computer and cell phone repair place, fixing cell phones and computers, and the biggest challenge was getting the parts, comparable parts.
Yeah, I bet.
And he had to, the owner had to go all the way to China to find places that could make that. So right now, the U.S., we're not doing near so well. We have 6 states that have some right to repair laws, and here in Ohio, we had something called SB 73 that actually got introduced way back in March, but unfortunately, it died in committee. So we once again we get to say, Ohio.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yes. I've always felt as a person with pretty serious untreated ADHD that the whole concept of a tiny phone which you carry with you everywhere was kind of sabotage. You know? Like, you had to know. I've lost surprisingly few of them, I have to say, considering it's me, but
Yeah.
still,
Yeah,
you know.
that's very easily dropped and destroyed.
It's like, oh, you're gonna have this tiny thing that costs several $100s with you at all times. That's not gonna go wrong at all.
and
you
we're
know?
we're completely dependent on them.
Yeah.
When I fixed them, because people would bring them in because they dropped them and the screen cracked and they couldn't do anything. Sometimes you'd fix these things and you'd give them back working, and people would literally have tears in their
Yeah, I
eyes.
bet,
They'd be like, "Thank you so much."
They got their life back.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. So, so to design them to break is immoral. And one aspect of this that people talk about in particular has a direct impact on your food bill, and that is combines and tractors, these huge things that have evolved into these massive technological things that are connected directly to satellites and the internet, and so farmers can control exactly what they're doing. And turns out these things, like a combine can cost $400,000 to $500,000, and farmers are finding that little tiny electric sensors in them that cost like $5 can break, and they're not allowed to fix it themselves. They have to ship their combines halfway across the country and pay thousands and thousands of dollars to these companies, and that directly, folks, makes food more expensive for you because the farmer has no choice but to pass that on.
This personally makes me angry because, my cousins used to actually go to bed with their shoes on so that when they were teenagers, so that they could get up on, I think it was Saturday morning, and go take stuff to the Muskegon farmers market.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to do that? They had this house that they worked on for a couple of decades that eventually, when they were, I think, almost ready to leave for college, they got heat in the upper bedrooms.
Mm-hmm.
How are you going to do that? Something like to somebody like that, who works that hard,
Right.
and just be like, oh, just pay to send your just giant expensive machinery across the world.
And
That'll be fine.
And fixing your own stuff has been a part of farmer culture
Yeah.
since we've had farmers. I mean, the farmers I've known are welders and designers, because
They do a little bit of everything.
yeah, you have to in order to have a functioning farm. But now with this planned obsolescence, we don't. So hopefully maybe SB 73 will make a comeback
And
next
of course,
year.
you got to pay that much to get something fixed, to buy something and then get it fixed. Then you're not going to want to do more expensive, even slightly more expensive, sustainable agriculture. Is
Yeah.
the thing.
Right. Okay, next story. I mentioned Molly, Slato, who was fighting the Trans Mountain Pipeline.
Right.
The Trans Mountain Pipeline is 90+% completed. It was started way back in 2012, so all the fighting, not just by the indigenous people, but everybody along the route has been fighting this thing in Canada, because the basic function of it is to take tar sands from Alberta and ship them to China. So this pipeline doesn't even benefit Canadians.
Wow.
And so it started in 2012. The cost has gone up to $31 billion. The company that started it got out long ago, and the Canadian government took it over. So this is all on Justin Trudeau personally. And what it would do, there is a pipeline already carrying about 300,000 barrels a day. This would increase the capacity to 900,000 barrels a day. And the very last piece of it, the very last chunk of it, is in a place called Pipsel, which is a sacred, like literally the most sacred part of the Sekwepum indigenous tribes territory near someplace called Jacko Lake. They're the Skeet Cheston band of Native Americans. And they were promised at the start of this, Trans Mountain Pipeline promised them the pipeline would not impact this sacred area.
Of course they were.
And now they've just gone back on it and they've dug it up. They've put trenches in it. And there was a very moving story. It was done by Ricochet Media and Indigen News and repeated by the Real News Network on December 15th, basically describing these women who went and put themselves on the line to get arrested to try to slow the thing down even more. And, Justin Trudeau has made this big thing about reconciliation with the Native Americans in Canada because, like the U.S., they've been treated horribly.
An important part of the reconciliation process is ceasing to do horrible things.
Exactly.
That's kind of a prerequisite. Otherwise, it doesn't mean much, the rest of it.
Yeah, you can't reconcile until you've stopped abusing.
Yes.
I mean, the flowers the next day is part of abuse pattern.
It's a cycle. They got little diagrams, people.
Yeah, and so Justin Trudeau's being 100% hypocritical on this, and we can just pray. It's scheduled to finally start pumping in a month or so, in the next few weeks. Let's pray that actually never happens, because the bottom line of all of this is that those tar sands are going to be killing us.
Yep.
Because CO2 is off the charts this year, and temperatures are off the charts, and to do more of it at this time is just insane. Okay, I've got two more stories to get to. We're running out of time here. Real quick, the Biden administration has decided that nuclear hydrogen doesn't meet their clean energy definition, which is good news in that a lot of nuke plants were saying, we're going to start making hydrogen with the government money that was put into the Inflation Reduction Act. It has hundreds of millions, it's like 180 million for hydrogen generation. But the Biden administration finally released the rules. It's got to be new clean generation. So existing nuke plants won't be able to access this money. Now, money is in tax credits, and there's about 180 million. Biden administration has about 60 billion direct subsidies for nuke plants. So it's not like nuke plants aren't his favorite thing. I mean, it's clear if you give somebody 65 billion cash and you give another thing 100 million tax credits, your preferences are clear. But the nuclear industry, this is essentially the crumbs. The nuclear industry wants both the cake and they want all the crumbs. So they're whining and crying about it. And so there's a 60-day comment period. It's up on February 26th. And so new generation, there are some companies, especially down in Texas, that are building new wind and solar, and they're signing up to be these hydrogen generators. And so, there are companies that are playing by the rules and actually creating a clean hydrogen economy. But there were three conditions. One, generation had to be near the source, which, generating hydrogen, explosive hydrogen gas, right at a nuclear plant. What could possibly go wrong with that?
Explosive?
It has to.
Did you just say explosive?
Yeah, the generation has to use excess clean power. So on a day when the solar and wind is putting out more than the grid needs, that's when you generate the hydrogen.
Oh, yay.
And of course, as I said, it has to be new generation. So that's a good story. And now some more good news. We're going off to Europe. And Spain has dumped nuclear power. Yay! They're going 100% wind, solar, and storage, and they're going to be there they're going to shut their last nuke plant in 2035. The first one will shut in 2027. They have 7 reactors, and what they've been doing is they finally factored in the waste costs, and they found that once taking care of the waste comes in, then nukes are insanely expensive and they don't want them. Okay, our final story, no ice in the Great Lakes. It's at a 50-year record low. It's been dropping, the amount of ice has been dropping 5% per decade.
It's not winter until some ice fisherman's SUV goes in Lake Erie, you know.
Right.
It's annual tradition.
I mean, you used to be able to drive all the way across the lake in the winter.
It's sort of like a human sacrifice, or a vehicular sacrifice to the gods, and
Yeah.
we were not able to do that this year.
No, I mean,
I guess they frown on the authorities frown on it if you just push an SUV into a lake randomly.
yeah, and really there's some ecological consequences of that, like oil and gas
there
and
might
stuff.
be. I can see that. Yeah.
So we don't recommend
No.
that. But we do recommend take a look at our show on the podcast or YouTube version on March 20th, 2022, What's Under the Ice. We did a big, long interview with Dr. George Bullerjohn from BGSU. There's a whole separate ecosystem in the Great Lakes once the ice forms, which isn't happening this year. All right, that's it. That was our anniversary show. Thank you so much for listening. I think we're just about out of time. So this is Joe DeMare.
And Rebecca Wood.
And we are signing off.
I don't want no oil, a spoil in my shoreline. I like fish much better than crud. I like birds and things a-creeping and crawling. Won't trade no more oil for blood. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that black demon oil's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. I don't want them nukes run by them kooks who think radioactivity is fun. No more three-headed frogs or kids with leukemia. Nuclear power ain't fit for a dog. The sun done give us all we need to make this country run. But that nuclear power's got us fussing and fighting, and I do believe it's time we was done. No